All right, guys, this is going to be a review of how we're creating the session delta pivots or the SDPs. What I have pulled up here is a replay of March 2nd. This is 8:30 in the morning, and this is when I'm pulling the session delta pivots that I am trading during RTH hours. So as you can see here, I have a 10K constant volume delta candles up. I do have this set to 3 ticks just to compress the candles a little bit to make it a little bit easier to see. This is also the same candle structure that you can use to find the trap traders amongst a couple other different settings. So as you can see here down on the bottom, I do have all of the different delta percentages and delta totals for each candle. I am not looking at a summary horizontally, but I am looking vertically, so a summary per candle. And here you can see that the highest delta candle is the 15% or 15.25% delta candle that is right here. And so the next thing that I do is I go and I put a modified fib extension tool on there, and I'm simply grabbing the highest and the lowest piece of this candle, and that is going to give me my range. So the SDP high is the high of that candle, or the high of the candle. The SDP low is the low of that candle, and the actual SDP or the session delta pivot is the center of that candle. If you click on this bracket here, you can see that the breadth or the distance in points from the low to the high is 7.75 points, which is important for how I'm trading these channels. The other thing to notice is that I do have extensions on these. Because they're fibs, the percentages look a little bit weird, but essentially you've got 100%, which is the range, that's 7.75 points, and that range is stacked on top of itself to give you the SDP-X or SDP Extreme, SDP Extension, however you want to look at it. And I take that extension or that breadth stacked on the top side one time and on the bottom side one time, and that gives me my full channel. So when I put these levels out each morning, your SDP-X on the high side is this green line. It could be the red depending on how the delta is. On a positive delta, I like to have the green on the top, and your SDP-X to the low side here, 38.68, and then of course your pivot here is 38.79 half. I try to round. So now I have my pivot for the session. It is 8:30 here. It's important to take that the delta reading before you get too far into the next session, because it will start to adjust the color scheme and just kind of gets a little bit wonky. So it's a little bit easier to see if you take this early. I am a little weary if the delta gets put in, say the candle right before the open at like 8:28, 8:29 has an extremely high delta. I will negate that and take the highest delta before, considering that to be RTH delta. So now that I have my pivot, it's time to trade them. And so the idea around trading these pivots is a return to mean. And so what I'm looking for is a 10K candle to close on the outside and to rotate from outside the extreme through, pulling into the pivot. The idea is that the pivot is a price attractor because you have high delta or high liquidity that's gone off in this area. And that liquidity, that area, whether it's a rebid, reoffer type zone, it's just going to pull price in. And I'm looking to return to mean from the extreme in, and then hope to get a reaction through and continuation through the mean to the other side of the extreme. The dotted yellow lines are just a secondary extension. I just keep an eye on these because typically if you see price drift away from these pivots too far, it can be an early indicator of a trend day. So I like to track how far away from the pivot that we've drifted, but I really don't trade these second extensions at all. Really just trading the green and the red from the outside in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replay. We're going to go to later in the afternoon. This is a trade that took place in the last hour of trading. So what I'll do is I'll pull that up here. A little context for this trade, and when I say context, I don't mean context from the market, because this trade is a bot type trade, if you want to call it that. The context, yes, it's important, and I do have a few rules regarding things that make the trade a no trade. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to take every single entry on this trade every time it gets presented, knowing that the stats of this trade are just going to produce a winning result. And so as you can see here, this channel has actually paid a few times. We'll let this data refresh, but one thing that I do track is how many times we've rotated through the channel already. Seeing a rotation already does help solidify that there will potentially be another rotation, especially when you see some of this re-offer. So at this juncture of the day, we're at the top of the extreme. I'd be looking to fade into the pivot and down below. And so I want to see a re-offer up in this area and take the momentum back through the extreme into the pivot into the other extreme. And as you can see here, the structure has set up very nicely for this re-offer. And so you have the reoffer zone sort of in this area. Even if they were to push above and trap, that's still fine for me. And they trap and they push back down through, maybe take some stops out. Those stops will help get me to my take profits. And if they don't trap and push up and they just reoffer, I will potentially just kind of push right down into my levels. So the A plus version of this setup is to see a full 10K candle close outside of the range. So as you can see here, this 10K candle has closed outside of the range. And so at this juncture, when this candle is closed outside of this SDPX at 38.91, I am looking to now take this trade with a resting order sitting at 38.91 quarter to go short. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this off of a compressed so you can see the full breadth of the 10K candles as they come through. And again, you can see that this is clearly above and is closed above. The one thing I do want to point out is you do have VWAP here. It can be a negator to the trade, but in this instance, I feel like it's a helper. VWAP is sitting just past or just at 4 points. My first take profit is 4 points on these trades. And so I'm looking at this as a slight benefit as VWAP is potentially going to help me push this trade down into my take profit and benefit the momentum of the trade, especially VWAP kind of pulling price in. And it already has shown some weakness as giving once. So again, I'm looking for the full extension all the way down here, just north of 20 points. And again, I think this context helps. If VWAP was just say 1 point away from my entry, that's going to negate this trade because it's sort of blocking my take profit. And so I do take these notes and kind of mine these things as I'm taking these trades. So with that being said, we'll play this on a pretty fast review. Again, resting order sitting here at 38.91 quarter, and I am looking for this to momentum in and through this level with a first target of 4 points. As you can see there, that happened pretty quickly. This would have triggered my trade here. And if we go ahead and take a look at what our MAE on this trade would be right now, we'll go ahead and click it to that. Let me just push this to my MAE measure. So you got 1.5 points of MAE right now. So it went against us by 1.5 points. And as we play this here, you can see very quickly this trade gets us our first take profit of 4 points. Again, this is just my strategy, and I have now moved my stop from 4 to 2. And so 2 point pullback will take us out, and this guarantees that the trade is paid for. And now I'm looking for a take profit at 8 points, 12 points, and then finally 20 points for my final set of runners. And again, as you can see, VWAP was helpful here. It pulled price down and in, and very quickly we go from our 4 points to, it looks like 9.75. So I'm on take profit 2 at this juncture, and I will be moving my stop to break even +2. So now a pullback in to 2 points above my initial entry will take my runners out of the trade. And as you can see here, I now have the protection of VWAP in case I do get a retracement. I'm not sure if that happens on this trade or not, but in this case, this one is going to end up going for the full distance, which makes it a good example, obviously. And you can see that the pivot will ultimately pull price in, and you see that the SDP high did act as resistance or support as it's kind of balancing in this area again, comes up and re-offers at the 38.83 area, finds a little bit of support at the pivot before it eventually starts to break through. And again, my third take profit on this trade is going to be at 12 points, which you can see we've got here. I do not adjust my stop on my last set of runners, so that will still be sitting at 2 points. And my last target is going to be 20 points. And if you'll notice, the breadth of this channel goes from 38.91 to 38.68, which is just more than 20 points. And again, 4 points 8 points and 12 points sort of front runs all of these natural support and resistance areas. So as you can see, we did find some balancing and support on this SDP high, and that's why I'm trying to take profit before it so that I can avoid this natural support resistance. Same thing at the pivot or the SDP low. I'm trying to get in front of those levels and use them to pull price into my targets and essentially through them. I'm fine if it balances after I've already taken my cores off and I'm just now sitting in the trade letting it work. This trade does kind of go all the way into the close, but ultimately does give you a nice 24-point range before closing the day. If you were to track this into Globex or keep your runners on in Globex, it actually does run for a fair amount and does balance after that. But this is what you're looking for on these trades, and that is a full rotation of the session delta pivots, and that's a return to mean trade that worked very nicely with only 1.5 points of MAE and at least 20 plus points for your profit. All right, guys, take care.